This is Tim, Recovery Coach Tim. This is a short video on kind of the process of learning to deal with addictions or codependency or issues that people have in their life. It's kind of a, we call it a merry-go-round down denial. That's kind of the way it's described. And as I go through the different stages, I'll try to explain them to you so that you can see these stages. And the only thing I can share with you is that these have been experienced by most people that have gone through some sort of process. These stages, I believe, very rarely, if never, can be skipped. And in fact, if you find yourself stuck in one of those stages, you can see that you're going to have to figure out some way to deal with that. But anyway, the process is something that I believe is spiritual principles. I believe that it's there. And I think regardless of what you're trying to deal with, it actually is something that we have to contend with. The first stage that we call it, and I'd like to just write them up here and list them. There's 8 stages as far as I'm concerned in dealing with this kind of situation. But the first stage is what I call shock and denial and shock. And the reason I put those 2 samples up, denial and shock, is because depending on what it is that's affecting you, if it's a kind of an ongoing relationship thing like addiction, like alcoholism, probably didn't come on quickly, it's probably been there a while, and so forth. So that would be more of a form of denial. If the issue is something sudden, like a phone call from a doctor that says you've got a terminal situation, or you have some sort of a situation that you're going to have to deal with, lots of times I call that shock. That's shock and denial. They're very similar. They have very beneficial conditions in the fact that you're controlling how you feel. You're controlling the process. You're trying to deal with it that way. And of course, if you're trying to talk to somebody that needs to go through these stages and they're in denial or they're in shock, you can see that that's very frustrating. It's very difficult because people tend to use that as their form of taking care of themselves. The second level is really what I call the guilt or pain size, and that's where people are beginning to feel that this is inevitable, that this is something that they're going to have to deal with, this is not going to go away with denial or with shock, and that it comes in, and then this tends to be a personal thing. It could be when you're driving down the car. I was driving the car when I was dealing with my alcoholism and my addiction, and I was beginning to kind of listen to what people were telling me, and I actually would shudder. My body would actually shake. There was one time when I actually had to pull off the road because I was afraid that I was going to wreck, and I had to sit there and just kind of shudder and shake because of the pain and the guilt. The next stage, I think, is the one that most people see from the outside in, and that's stage 3, which is called anger and bargaining. And what that means is that you're going to have a time when you're going to, the upsetness, the pain of beginning to realize this condition comes from the inside out, and it will come from anger and so forth. And at that time, when that anger comes up, a lot of people will like to negotiate with that. Well, it's not as bad as, or I'm not as bad as that, or you do things worse, or you'll attack, you'll do whatever. And so a lot of people see this process from this point of view because that's the one that affects them the most. That's the one that they see the most, and that's the one they can see how difficult it is to deal with them. The next stage is mostly personal. It's depression. and loneliness. That's where it becomes very, very intimate, very personal, very much inside. This is the reaction to it. A lot of people think that depression is actually anger shoved in or pushed in, or anger swallowed, and that's what causes the depression, and there's probably some truth to that. But also there is a loneliness. There is a uniqueness. It's different from a group to an individual. It becomes very personal, becomes very intimate, and people basically feel very, very alone and lonely about that. And that's the stage that usually causes us most of the difficulty, because people in that stage are very uncomfortable. It's very difficult, and they actually will then do something to artificially make them feel better. If it's an alcoholic and he's trying to quit drinking and he gets into the stage, he probably will start drinking again. He probably will drink again. Or if it's a drug addict, they'll use again. If it's got some sort of other behavior like gambling or sexual pursuits, they'll act out again. And of course that sets up the cycle, and they'll go right back up to denial. And so that's why we call this first stage of this process the merry-go-round called denial. And that you get to the depression or you get to the loneliness, and then you decide, I'm not going to go through this, I'm going to go back, and then you'll use or do something artificially. And of course that makes you not remember, not wonder, and you'll wonder, why was I so upset, why was that bothering me, and things like that. And it keeps going on and on. Of course it's a form of us kicking the can down the road, kicking the process down the road, and it's not dealing with it. The next stage that we like to talk about is, this is the stage we try to work for, and this is what I call the decision stage and or the acceptance. This is a very important stage here. This kind of divides the process up into two parts. The one part keeps going around, and then once you break through that, once you get into decision-making or acceptance mode, it's very much of an action. It's like actually the first half of the first step of Alcoholics Anonymous, admitting that you're powerless over alcohol and that your life is unmanageable. This is the first part of that. It has to do with the decision-making, making a decision, deciding, accepting, admitting, and that your life is unmanageable. There's an acceptance there, and that's where it comes from. From that stage, we begin to start making process, and there comes what I call the most important part of it, which is hope. Hope is the stage that you hear from other people, you hear stories from other people, that they got better, they got through this, they've been able to deal with this, and then there is a sense from the inside out, there is a sense of hope. It very rarely does this come from the outside in. It's really not given to them by somebody else. It's when they realize it on their own, they realize it themselves. And of course, in Alcoholics Anonymous or in the 12 steps, that would actually be the second step, which you come to believe that there is a power greater than you, greater than this process, greater than this dilemma, greater than this situation that can help you, can restore you to sanity is the way we describe it. And that's where hope comes in. So there's one ingredient that is out there that most addicts or people that are going through some sort of grief process, the one thing that they're missing is the spiritual aspect of hope. The next one is what I call action, and that's what I call peace. If you go through this stage, if you get hope, then you start doing some action. In the 12 steps of recovery or the process of Alcoholics Anonymous, the first part of that, the third step is you made a decision to turn your will in your life. Basically, you said, there's something that has power, can help me. I'm deciding to ask for help. A lot of us say there's only two prayers in the world. One of them is, God damn it, when you're going through this early process, and the other is, God help me. And everything else kind of stems from that. The powerless, vulnerability, preciousness, and then the ability to ask for help. And that creates action, and that action does create a little bit of peace. There is a benefit from that action. we say in Alcoholics Anonymous even, that you're not going to be able to think your way into proper action. You've got to act your way into proper thinking. So action is what we talk about there a lot. And then the last stage that I use in this process is what I call love. And of course I call that spiritual love, unconditional love. It's understanding the life process. It's understanding that whatever is going on, for anything to be alive, something has to die. For every good, there's bad. There is a balance. For every life, there's death, and for every death, there's life. For every person getting sober, there's relapses, things like that. These things kind of balance out. It's the way the creative process is made. And we end up being able to understand that in a unconditional kind of way. And unconditional to me means no expectations. That there is a love, there's an awareness, there comes fellowship from that, there comes understanding from that, there comes family from that. If you've ever been in a grieving process where somebody is dying and you go to hospice, you'll see many times that the person is dying and they maybe have a few days to stay alive, or a few hours to stay alive, and they've actually accepted it. They're actually at peace. They're actually peaceful. A lot of the family members haven't. They go kind of ballistic. They're still bouncing around, still in anger, still in denial, still in depression. And the person that's accepted it is peace. And that's what we're trying to describe. In fact, these processes, I think, first came from hospice. People that are diagnosed with a terminal condition, they have to go through these stages. I think those are the exact same stages that we deal with our addictions. If you're an alcoholic, you're going to have to grieve the loss of your ability to drink alcohol. If you're a drug addict, you're going to have to grieve the loss of your ability to use drugs. If you're codependent or you're a caretaker, you're going to have to grieve the loss of the other person's well-being affecting you. That loss is a form of grief. It may not even be the person, it might be the vision you have. It's almost like some people, when they get a divorce or maybe a relationship's over, they'll be very, very sad. They'll go through grief. They may not be grieving the person, but they may be grieving the process or the visions or the dreams they had when they chose to get married. They had an expectation, they had a script, they had the way things were going to be, and they've got to let go of, give up the loss of that kind of situation. This is the process that's necessary for recovery. This is a process that we try to guide people through. This is the process that I think is necessary for anyone to be able to take care of themselves spiritually.